Town of Wilmington Board of Appeals meeting for December 11th, 2019, it being 7:02. The first case on the docket is a continued case from the November 13th, 2019 meeting. It's case 1919, 30 Burnap Street, James Mangano, map 34, parcel 114, to acquire a special permit under 6.1.6.4 to raise and extend a non-conforming structure.
Mr. Chairman, good evening.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Peterson, how are you?
Attorney Robert Peterson for the applicant, James Mangano. Since it's been 60 days since the board originally heard this case, do you mind if I give a brief recitation?
No,
of the
I think
case
it would be,
itself?
helpful for everybody, so go at it.
Mr. Chairman, this is an application filed on behalf of Mr. Mangano to demolish an existing non-conforming structure and to construct a new non-conforming structure for the property located on Burnap Street. As I'm sure the board is aware from the prior hearing, the existing dwelling is 14.3 feet from the front sideline of Burnap Street. The left side of the dwelling is 3.7 feet from the existing sideline setback, and the right side is 14.5 feet from the existing setback. The proposed dwelling that Mr. Mangano would like to put on the property would be moved back 5 feet, so the setback on the front yard would be 20.5 feet. We've made the left setback 10 feet, and the right setback we've made conforming at 16 feet. The proposed dwelling is 24 feet in width, and the approximate height of the dwelling would be 24.5 feet. And I believe that pictures were submitted prior to, at the time of the last public hearing, showing the existing dwelling, and I'd be happy to pass them around for the board's leisurely viewing. And, Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully point out to the board that the standard for granting a special permit in these circumstances by statute is clear. And this standard is that the proposed use is not substantially more non-conforming than the existing use. And I would submit to the board that not only is this proposed use substantially better than the existing house, Mr. Mangano has made every possible effort to, within the confines of building a reasonably sized house on the dwelling, to conform with the current R10 setbacks in that area. And I believe that the recommendations of the planning board at the meeting of October 1st were pretty concise to recommend approval. The proposed house meets all required setbacks except for one side setback, and is an improvement compared to the existing house. It does not appear to be more detrimental to the neighborhood, and I would submit to the board that not only is it more detrimental, it's a vast improvement to the neighborhood. The existing dwelling on that house is actually condemned.
And I believe, if my memory serves, I agreed with your assessment, however, there were members of the board.
I understand.
And there were some members of the board that had some questions. So I guess what I would do at this point is I would open it up to whichever member wants to, address any questions or comments to you.
That's fine.
I don't believe I closed the hearing, so after that, I will entertain any comments from anybody in the audience that wishes to be heard, and then we'll deliberate on it.
May I just make I will entertain questions from any member of the board. I would just point out to the board that should the board, this is an opportunity for this board to limit the size of this house, because the size of the house that Mr. Mangano can build on this lot, even if you restrict him to a 20-foot width, he's able to move back up to the 15-foot front yard setback, and his maximum house length would be 80 feet. Now,
Yeah, and I believe that was articulated at the last meeting,
he's obviously not going to construct an 80-foot house, but
Right.
if he's got to construct a 20-foot house,
Right.
he clearly is going to move it 5 feet up further, and he's going to make it 6 to 8 feet higher. So it won't be 24 and a half feet if he has to construct
I
a
understand.
24-foot.
I understand that, and I think that was pointed out to the board at the last meeting. So does anybody wish to address Attorney Peterson on this issue or have any questions or comments on it?
My comments are the same as last month. You've represented the house as 24 feet wide, and the only portion of the house that's 24 feet wide is the back corner where that little one-story shed structure is. So I think the house is closer to 20 feet wide. And right now, there's currently a two-story, 20-foot wide structure on the lot. And I don't believe that just because this is a non-conforming pre-existing condition, it mandates that we have to approve a bigger house than was on the lot right now. So that's my feeling, and I believe it was your son who said the same thing, that, you know, we could put an 80-foot-long house on, which is unrealistic, and I don't think any builder or developer would actually do that, but well within their right, I suppose. But I don't think that this provision in our bylaws gives a carte blanche to build any size house that you feel is appropriate for resale or value, or however you want to term it. So that's, and I think it's disingenuous to characterize the existing house as 24 feet wide, because it's just a small,
Can I see those pictures?
that's that back little shed roof next to the oil tank. I believe that's the only section that is, from what I can tell, is the 24-foot wide section of the house.
I believe that's incorrect, Tony. If you look at the existing dwelling, the
Yep.
24-foot wide section is 15 feet long, 24 feet wide, and 8.8 feet wide on the opposite side of the house. So your characterization of what's 24 feet wide is incorrect.
Well, you have to show me that, because I'm
It was
looking,
submitted, I believe, with the last hearing.
I have,
It's right there. And can I address your comment, if I may, as well?
this is the same one I'm looking at.
It's 24 feet wide across the back.
I agree, but isn't that the section where this little shed roof is? This little one-story piece?
Yeah, but it's 24 feet wide, not just that 2 feet. If you look at the plot plan, it's 24 feet wide, back 15 feet, and across 24 feet.
Right, but the two-story section of this house, the main body of this house, that's 2 stories wide, how wide is that? That's
Can I
2
see that?
stories, that's
Can I see that?
that's 2 stories high. The main 2-story structure.
It's 24 feet. It's 24 feet all the way across, if you look at the plot plan. It's not just 24 feet where the bump out is.
The front porch that says 18.2 feet. See that right there on the?
I do.
Okay, so there's 18.2 feet, and then that's set back from the main house, slightly on each corner.
But the 24-foot width is all the way across. It's not just where you're pointing out. It's straight across the back of the house. It's 24 feet wide.
But this section right here,
But it's fine. I'm not, you know what, I'm not gonna argue semantics with you. What you're saying is because that's 2 feet, that my proposal for this particular house is unreasonable. And I wanna know, honestly, I just wanna know what you think about this proposal is substantially more detrimental to this neighborhood than the existing house, because that's the legal standard that you have to use to vote against the case. Honestly, I've been here for 30 years. I've had cases voted down before, and I've left here feeling that if you voted against it, I've had him vote against cases, and I've had you vote against cases, and I've left here saying that, you know what, if they voted against it, they must not have thought it was right. In this particular case, what I'm proposing is more than reasonable. Well, I don't take a case in here if I couldn't vote for it if I was sitting in your chair. And I wouldn't tell somebody to bring a case in here if I didn't think it was reasonable. So if I have somebody that come into my office with a non-conforming use, I'll say to them, look, make it as conforming as you possibly can. I understand the house was built before there was any zoning in that area, so there were no setbacks. If you look at the assessor's map, there's probably no house in that neighborhood that complies with any
then
of the setbacks.
why don't we change the zoning in that whole area?
It's not the point, though, Tony. The point is, if houses age out and they're replaced, you should replace them with something that's construction reasonable, construction-wise reasonable, and also reasonable to the abutters. If I thought this was unreasonable, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair. It would be absurd to say, if you're gonna take a house down on Burnap Street, make it conform. Make it conform. It's not right.
Well, I look at it a little differently, all right? This is probably one of the first tear downs that an applicant's brought in. There was actually 2 stories. Most of these tear downs that come in are 1-story homes on these lots. This is probably one of the first ones that I've seen that's actually 2 stories. So when most of these lots were built back when, and they put them right up against the property lines, they were all 1-story homes. So the way they imposed on property lines was lessened because they were 1 story. So putting a 2-story home within that same setback, I think, is more detrimental to the neighbor. So hold on, let me finish. So I'm saying I believe that there is no way that top, and I'm looking at the plans that you submitted, that 2-story section of house is not 24 feet wide. The main gable of the 2-story structure is less than 24 feet wide.
The structure across the back, if you look at the plot plan, is 24 feet. But in all honesty, it's not really germane to the factors that you would take into account in making your decision as to whether this house is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than this house. It's just not. It's not. And there's no way you can say it is, Tony. It's just no way, there's no way you can logically say that this is substantially more detrimental to Burnap Street than this. There's none. There just isn't any. And I came here with a proposal that was more than reasonable for what's going to be built on this lot. And it allows you to control the size of it, the height of it, the length of it. It allows you to control everything about it. And there's just no way you can ever articulate to anyone that this, by a legal standard, that this is substantially more detrimental to that neighborhood. There's just not.
Well, I have a different view on it. I believe the bylaw is there to allow you to build a home on a lot that is difficult to build a home on, right? If there was some other mitigating factor that required us to encroach on one of the setbacks more than the other, I think that that's what the bylaw is there for, because it's a special lot. But I think just because it's a special permit doesn't give the builders and the applicants or whoever comes in the right to just throw away the setbacks and build whatever size home they want to on that lot. I don't agree with that.
I agree with you, and that's why I didn't do that. And there are mitigating factors that would allow for the construction of this house on this lot. It's a non-conforming lot. Non-conforming lots are given extra zoning protection for a reason. They don't conform. So to say to a guy, look, you got a 50-foot lot, so I know you had a non-conforming house on there, but if you're gonna take it down, you gotta make it conforming. It's unreasonable.
Hold on, I never said it had to conform. we can go back and we can read I never said it had to conform. I just said that there's an existing house on there that I believe is 20 feet wide at the second floor story. So in my opinion, you're asking to build a bigger house than is currently there.
But I'm reducing the nonconformities on every, no, I'm reducing them everywhere. I'm moving the house back 5 feet, I'm making one side conform, and I'm asking for a 5-foot special permit on one side. That's all I'm asking for. In a completely rectangular house. And Tony, I respect your opinion, but there's just no way that this proposal is substantially more detrimental to that neighborhood. None. And if there is, and if you think there is, I really would like you to articulate it. Because that's the legal standard that you have to use in deciding this case.
But can I say something? So, but knowing that, I think the more detrimental verbiage is is actually being way overused, because you're saying that it's no more detrimental, but you could also build a smaller house, and we were compromising at, you could make it a 20-foot wide house.
That's not a compromise. He can build that house. That's not a compromise. I wouldn't be here if he wanted to build a 20-foot house. He can build a 20, he can build a 20 by 80-foot house. Is he gonna build an 80-foot house? No, but he's probably gonna build a 45-foot house. And if we're gonna get into semantics about what he can build, I mean, all you have to do is look at the house on Glen Road that was built. It's narrow and long. Is that nicer looking than this? It's not.
But
It's not.
that's a little bit controversial
No,
in the
but it's-
sense of, because
it's-
that's not what we really approved in this, and,
But
you know.
but what you're gonna get is the same type of house. It's not, it doesn't look good. It's just not, it's not a marketable house. It's 20 feet wide.
I think, and I said this at the last meeting, part of our purpose, I think, as a Board of Appeals, is to take the general well-being of the town into account and the various areas of the town. And the reason, it's called a Board of Appeal, because we're here to make these judgment calls. And hopefully, we're going to exercise our discretion to help maybe particular areas become better. That's why, you know, it's not always such a bright line. There is a sliding scale. And this particular area and this particular lot would benefit greatly from the proposal that's before us. And I have no problem exercising my discretion and my judgment in approving this. I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's a no-brainer. Other people can disagree, but sometimes if you're too rigid in adhering to the bright line rules, you don't do for the better good. You don't do for the better good. You don't work for the betterment of the town, and maybe the areas of the town that need a little bit of a gentrification, a little bit of a renewal, and it's gonna, and I think that this is, not only do I think it's an appropriate application, I think it's a wonderful application. And I approve it without reservation. But I'm only, like I say all the time, I'm only one member. Everybody has different philosophical views on this. But I think we have to be reasonable when we take an application into consideration. We have to think about, does it better the neighborhood? Does it better the overall town? And I'm in approval of it, so.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can you tell me where, because I don't think I have it, or it wasn't given to me. Where is the septic and what does it look like?
Sewer. It's sewer.
Oh, okay,
Sewer.
that's, I knew
That whole
that.
neighborhood's on
Yep,
sewer.
okay, okay.
I mean,
Okay.
Tony, I mean, I look at it, and he's only off on the left side, looking at the print, 10 feet. The other one's 16 feet. I mean, if you want to shift them over a foot, because you can still, nothing changes, and take them, you know, instead of 10 feet on that one property line side, make them 11 feet off that one line, and he still maintains the 24 when he's here. We shift them over another foot, which makes it more aesthetic to the neighbor on this side. And the value, as far as the aesthetic value of that, like the chairman said, looking at a brand-new construction, colonial, and let's face it, you know, I shouldn't say it, but I'm gonna. When you're a homeowner, and you're paying your taxes, and you know, obviously, this is an investment. You work hard for your mortgage, and the bottom line is, the value of property, they don't build it anymore, they don't make it. So, I mean, if we can shift and get a good quality home here, he's a good builder from what I see, I don't have any problem with this.
Can I just, Tony, just say two quick things? Sure. I would ask you to consider the size of the existing lot and the size of the proposed house just in a bigger context of whether it's reasonable for the lot. And as to your comment that many of these houses replace one-story homes, there are 2 one-story homes that I know of in that neighborhood. One of them is right beside it, I'll give you that. And there's a ranch 2 houses down on the opposite side. Every other house in that neighborhood is at least 2 stories or 1.5. And they haven't been torn down. Some of them have been constructed recently. There are split gambrels. There are a couple of splits. But even the older colonials there are at a minimum 1.5 stories high. I mean, I grew up in that neighborhood, so I'm familiar with what's up there.
I'm conceding there's a two-story house on that lot. I'm conceding
No,
that.
but what you're saying is that, your comment was that a lot of these proposals are two-story homes replacing single-story homes, which would give somebody cause to think that you're taking down all of the single-story houses and building two and two-and-a-half-story houses. But in this neighborhood, this house is consistent with the size of the other houses in the neighborhood. There is a one-story house next door, in a ranch, 2 houses up across the street, but the rest of them are 1.5 to 2 stories high. And they're not new construction. A couple of them are, but most of them were built in the 20s and the 30s. And I'd be willing to slide it over, but I would just ask you to consider whether the proposal itself is substantially more detrimental, because I think if you spin it in your head, you're gonna determine that it's not, so.
So, there's, I look at this, like I said, I look at this differently. I have you come in, Ray, a bunch of other people, say, oh, you can't build smaller homes that are marketable or whatever. I have examples here that I carry with me for this very reason of 20-foot wide homes that are 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath homes that are all very attractive, cookie-cutter plan book homes. They are out there. They've been built. There's a couple examples of them in Wilmington that have been built on this size lot.
I'm not saying they're unattractive. I'm just saying,
No, we've had builders come in the past, and you've alluded to it as well, that in order to make a home that is a reasonable home, you have to go to 24 feet wide, which I categorically disagree with. You don't have to go to 24 feet wide. It is a more valuable home, and is it a better home? Sure, it's a bigger home. But these lots that are 50 feet wide had smaller homes built on them for a reason, because they're narrower. And I think there are certain cases where we've approved homes that are wider, and I take every case on an individual basis. I don't put a blanket over all of these. But this is an example where there is a 2-story home on the lot. And the 2-story home, the 2-story section of that home is not 24 feet wide. And I don't,
that shouldn't be your criteria for deciding whether this particular proposal is substantially more detrimental to that neighborhood. And if you think this house is, honestly, and I've listened to everything you've said, but I wouldn't find even your objection to the 24 feet to meet the standard of substantially more detrimental. Now, I've watched since October, and this was first heard, I've watched every meeting of every lot that's come in like this, and there was an applicant that said that it's not, a recent applicant told this board it's not financially feasible to build a 20-foot home when he asked for a 24-foot home, and the board said, fine. And I'm not saying you should apply that standard to me. I'm telling you that this proposal is reasonable under the circumstances for this lot. It just is. And you're asking me to ask my client to build a bigger house on that lot. And I don't understand why you wouldn't take the opportunity to limit exactly what he can build there. Go ahead.
no.
At this point, I think we're gonna kind of going around in circles. I think we've articulated, unless you want to add something else, or the other board members want to add something. I'm inclined to see if the gallery has any comments on it. We can always bring it back here for a final deliberation, and I'm sure Attorney Peterson will entertain any questions we may have at that point. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna open up, or continue to open the public hearing on this. Does anyone here wish to be heard on this particular application? Going once, going twice. Public hearing is closed. Now let's bring it back. If any of the other members want to have any comment or question or deliberation to an end result, I suggest we go in that direction. Anybody? Anyone want to say anything?
I actually, just because now, remembering or being reminded that it was on sewer. Although I understand where you're saying that you could build longer, higher, the whole thing. I would be inclined to vote for this, although only because it's on the sewer.
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you considering the fact that, honestly, I consider the proposal reasonable. I wouldn't bring an unreasonable proposal in here, because if I couldn't vote for it, I wouldn't sit here. But I don't vote, you do, so.
All right, Ray, Tom, you have any comments, or anyone care to make a motion on this application?
I make a motion that we approve the case, not 19-19, 30 Burnap Street, special permit under 6164 to raise and extend a non-conforming structure under the plan that's presented tonight in front of us.
It being no more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Correct.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor? 4. All those opposed? 1.
Thank you, Mr.
There you go. Take care.
I have,
All
next
right.
one's mine, too.
Good to see you, Rob. All right. Next case is case 2119, Golden Realty Trust, 3 Royal Street, map 84, parcel 21, to acquire a special permit under 6.1.6.4, also to raise and construct a new non-conforming structure.
Mr. Chairman, very similar matter. This property is on Royal Street, which is off of McDonald Road, which is off of Salem Street. It's actually at the corner of Royal and Salem. I believe that my statement of facts indicates why this use, as with the prior use, would not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing use. This lot contains 19,979 square feet, and the existing dwelling is 14.4 feet from the front yard. Side yard setback, 17.6 feet from the front yard setback. And the proposed dwelling would meet all of the requirements for an R20 zone. It's actually going to be set back 41.2 feet from Royal Street and would meet all of the required side yard setbacks. As a matter of information, Mr. Chairman, this area is in an R60 zone, and I believe I submitted copies of the GIS map for the immediate area and an assessor's map for the entire area with the application. Other than a couple of the lots off of Curtis Street, which are in swamp, there isn't a lot on Royal Street, McDonald's Road, or anywhere in that area that would comply with the requirements of the R60 zone. All of the houses that were built in that neighborhood were built prior to that property being rezoned R60 in, I believe, 1957. And all of the houses that have been constructed at the end of McDonald Road are actually on 20,000 square foot lots or less, because they were built as CSD houses. As a matter of information, I believe the planning board is planning to submit a zoning article for the May town meeting to rezone this entire area from R60 to R20.
Before we begin, do I have the recommendations on this? Okay, at its meeting on December 3rd, 2019, the planning board voted to recommend on this application as followed. Upon motion duly made and seconded, it was unanimously voted to recommend approval. The proposed house does not appear to be more detrimental to the neighborhood. Additionally, the board is discussing a zoning change, as you indicated, from R60 to R20 for lots in this neighborhood, and the proposed dwelling would meet the R20 setbacks.
As a matter of just discussion, I had had this discussion not only with Ms. Gingrich, but with Ms. Hamilton, who was the prior planning director, that it's patently unfair to hold applicants in that neighborhood to the R60 setbacks, because nobody meets it. And when that zoning was enacted in that area, nobody met it. So to ask somebody who has an existing non-conforming house who takes it down to meet the standards for R60 setbacks would be totally unreasonable.
Let me ask you, I mean, I don't know the boots on the ground, but what is the reasonable likelihood that this would make the warrant on the town meeting this year?
It's gonna be a planning board sponsored article.
But it is? Because, I mean, I noticed the recommendation says that they are discussing.
Well,
But
they've been
does it,
discussing it for a couple of years, because what they're gonna propose makes sense, because if you have, it's a little different than Burnap Street, because Burnap Street has small lots anyway, it's in an R10 zone, some of them are 10,000, some of them are 5,000, some of them are smaller. In this neighborhood, most of them are 20,000 or more, but none of them are 60,000. So the whole concept behind R60 zoning, which was, if you ever look at a zoning map in Wilmington, the R60 zone is all on the perimeter, because when the zoning was changed in '57, none of that land was developed, and we only had two zones, R10 and R20, and they really didn't know what they were gonna do with it. So they just said, we'll zone it R60, which doubles your frontage to 200 feet, increases your setback from 30 feet to 50 feet in the front, and increases the side setbacks from 15 to 25 feet.
from your discussions with the planning director, do you get a sense that there is a support and an appetite for presenting that zoning change?
Yes. It makes sense for reasons just like this.
Sure. But- So I just wanted to get a feel for where the planning director was coming on that. It does sound like it's something that's probably warranted.
Well, you put every house in that neighborhood if you want to take it down, because they're all old, just like Grove Avenue, and if you want to take it down, you're being asked to meet setbacks, which on many of the lots would be more difficult to meet than it is on this lot. I mean, we actually, other than the 7.5 feet I'm asking for the front yard, we meet the setbacks, so.
Okay, well, first I'll kick it to the board. Does anyone have any questions of the applicant?
I have one. So, you said it's been kicked around for a couple of years, right? So why hasn't it passed? Why hasn't it, what's the reason why it hasn't gone through?
To tell you, Tom, for the same reason they haven't done it up on Hopkins Street. And Hopkins Street has been developed through piecemeal rezoning, basically as R20. Because Hopkins Street from the school to the Barica line is R60.
Yeah.
And most of Chestnut Street is R60. All of Andover Street is R60 on both sides. So those areas were all done in +57, and nobody's just ever come back
Yeah,
to
but
revisit it.
we can't pass it with the assumption that it's gonna change to R20. We have to
Well, I'm
pass
not-
it with the presumption of what the facts say right here.
I'm not asking you actually to do that. That was the fact that
That
they,
was-
they threw in.
Well, I mean, the planning board threw that in.
But
I just think it's something that.
Not
that
you,
we
I'm
should-
saying
No,
the planning board.
I understand, but I do think it's something that we should consider, just because if it does seem to be a proposal that has some support, and it is going to be presented in a short time period, it would behoove the applicant to get ahead of it.
What-
If he has a good proposal,
Yeah.
let's deal with it now. And
May I just reply to Tom's question, if I may, Mr. Chairman? What it does say, Tom, is that the proposal is based on what currently exists in that neighborhood is reasonable, and I think the planning board recognizes that there are many lots in that neighborhood
Yeah.
in the event that a house has to be taken down that would be similarly situated.
it's a beneficial and ameliorating factor.
Right.
Sure.
So it says the existing septic system installed August 2019. I just wanted to confirm, so did that actually happen?
Yes.
And the reason why you're asking for relief on the front is can you not get any closer to the septic system?
Correct. Plus, you'd have to make the house smaller, because if you wanted to comply with the R60 setbacks, you'd have to be 50 feet back. And there's no other house in that neighborhood that's 50 feet back. I mean, that is another reason why they should consider rezoning it, because none of the houses, if you look at, it's hard to read, but I submitted a copy of the assessors map. If you look at that and you say to yourself, if many of these old houses had to be taken down, could they meet a 50-foot setback in the front in a 25-foot setback in the rear? And the answer is no, because your house size, your building envelope would be down to 0, so. Because most of those houses aren't any longer than 100 feet, the lots, most of the lots.
So the difference is 8.8 feet, right?
And we meet all the other setbacks.
It's just the front.
Correct. And as with the other case, I mean, when you look at that and you're gonna submit it, you say, what would be reasonable for what's in that neighborhood? So, and it's significantly more conforming as to setbacks than the existing house is now, so.
All
And
right,
then-
at this point, I'll open up the public hearing. Does anybody wish to be heard on this application? Sure, if you could just stand and give us your name and where you live, ma'am, please.
Erin Corbeck, 1 Royal Street.
Hey, Aaron, how are you?
How are you?
Good.
I just wondering what the actual side setbacks are,
The proposed setback?
proposed ones, yes, I'm familiar with the current ones.
They would be 25 feet and 45 feet.
25 feet on the, 25 feet from 5 feet to Intervale.
Yeah.
Not a good question, thank you.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice, public hearing is closed. We'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion, questions, or a motion.
I just asked, hold on, I just wanted to- she said Intervale, so this is actually a corner lot, correct?
Correct.
Actually, you're actually asking for relief on 2 sides.
Can I just check, Tony? Did I do it, Mike? Yeah, thanks, Cal. Just look at the GIS map, Tony, because it doesn't appear on the plot.
That's not on the plot plan, but
No.
the left side property line, the 45 feet is actually street frontage, right?
This one, Bob?
You could make that argument, and Intervale's a paper street, there's no street there. But you could make the argument that it would be a corner lot. So if you want to add that to the decision, if you're inclined to vote for it, that would probably be appropriate. But that street is not there, so,
Oh, it's not,
no.
okay. So,
I mean, every building inspector has a different interpretation of what setbacks you'd have to meet. I don't know what Al's is. Jim Russo's always was, you could use the paper street if it was unconstructed as your setback, because you own to the middle of it.
To the center line.
Correct.
Al feels the same.
Yeah.
I think that's the standard,
Yeah.
accepted, that you can go to the center line. Anybody else? Anyone care to make a motion? Do you have something else, Tom?
I do, so, like I said, I look at every case differently, and I look at every case on its own merits. And in this case, I feel as though it is appropriate for this lot. I think that you're asking for something you're asking for something on a much bigger lot than the last lot. So I'm less sensitive to the size of the house that's being built on it. The lot's over 130 feet wide on the frontage. So, and you're meeting pretty close, almost both side setbacks. The front setback, as you point out, most of the houses on that street are 50 feet or whatever, less than 50 feet as far as the setback goes. So I have no problem with it. And, this is, like I said, every case I look at on its merits. I don't put a blanket over all of these, that they have to be, lay down the law and they all have to adhere to it fully. I think this is one that's appropriate, so I have no problem. I just want to let you know, I'm not picking at, these projects, but I've felt this way since I started on this board, on on special permits, on undersized lots. I don't necessarily consider this an undersized lot. It's, as you point out, it's probably a zoning issue that should have been resolved a long time ago. But, with that being said, you change this from R60 to R20, now you're gonna have massive houses on these lots, which I would be against. I'd rather see something like this stay and have some reasonable oversight over the size of the houses that get built on these lots, as opposed to saying you can build up to 15 feet off of these lots and build these huge houses on it. So that's how I feel. And that's consistent with the way I felt on the last case. So if I had to vote for it in town meeting, I'd vote against it. And I'd rather see it be applied on a case-by-case basis instead of blanketly over a large area. So on this one, I have no problem with it.
I understand, I appreciate your position,
Yep.
I get it, so. I've been here before, so.
That's all.
Anyone?
I'll make a motion to approve case 21-19, 3 Royal Street, to acquire a special permit 6.1.6.4 to raise and construct a new non-conforming structure as per the plans reviewed or
No more
submitted.
detrimental.
Submitted.
That's fine.
And it being no more
And
detrimental.
it being no more detrimental.
We have a motion, do we have a
Oh,
second?
second.
We have a second, all those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There you go.
Have a good evening.
You're
everyone.
welcome.
Thank you.
Take care, gentlemen. Okay, the last item on the application agenda is case 2219, 2 King Street Extension, map 53, parcel 10B, John and Cecily Sullivan? Did I get that right? Okay. It's to acquire a variance under 10.6 to construct a farmer's porch. And can you folks just identify yourselves?
John Sullivan. Trevor Kelly, contractor in town. Just
Hi,
getting-
Trevor.
Yep.
My initial take on this before we hear from you is, I'm a little questioning why it's here requesting a variance. Can somebody edify me on that?
Yes, so my belief is they're looking for just a few feet in the front on a non-conforming lot. So I would assume that that would be a special permit
Right.
to extend a non-conforming. Al
The building
stated,
inspector.
the building inspector, I'm sorry, Al, stated that he believed it was a variance because of when you go into the frontage, it becomes a variance. Myself and Valerie Gingers, the planning director, both questioned him on this because the way we read the law, it's a special permit.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever I can't remember ever entertaining a variance on a farmer's porch like
Right.
that.
So that was my argument on
But, I mean,
Right, and I have to, this is.
and the
based
way
on
it works
building
is the
inspector.
building inspector's word is the law until he gets to us.
Right.
And we can overturn the building inspector, but I kind of would like an answer on that question that's accurate before I do so.
Okay.
Can I ask, is it because, is the lot R20 and R10? Why is there?
Yes, correct.
So maybe, is that why? It's two,
It's a split zone,
It's
but
a-
where the building is going, they would use it, all right, so this part was,
I think when you factor in the fact that the neighbor's frontage,
because of this, it's a corner, so they use 30.
And the only reason that I'm even bringing this up as a predicate matter is that a variance standard, and I'm sure you gentlemen are aware of it, the variance standard is very strict. I mean, and I don't see anything in the application articulated that would lead me to believe that a variance is appropriate here. But if it's something that doesn't need to proceed by way of a variance, then that question doesn't even have to be reached.
You have a planning board recommendation?
Yeah, let me read that in. It says, at their meeting on December 3rd, 2019, the planning board motion duly made and seconded and unanimously voted that the applicant does not appear to have shown a hardship, which is what I just said. A plan should be submitted that shows the extent of the proposed encroachment into the front setback. A second-story addition is shown on the house plans within the setback. Since this was not part of the application, the board reserves comment until an application is submitted. So, I mean, I believe that we need to have a definitive answer on this question. Because if it is indeed, and maybe we should, and I'm going to suggest that somebody reach out to town council
Okay.
and ask town council what his take on this is. Sounds like something he may be able to answer in a fairly succinct manner. But, again, that's gonna be up to him. But, I mean, if, it kind of directs where we go here. If he believes that it's a variance, you guys are gonna have a tougher road to hoe. If he says that, no, I believe that it, doesn't require a variance standard, then I think you're in much better stead. So rather than prejudice you guys on the outset with information that may not be accurate, my feeling, and I'll open it up to the rest of the board, is that maybe we get some direction from council, so we at least know which, we're on the right track before we make a decision. But, I'll open it up to any other comment.
So if that's the case, it would have to be withdrawn, right?
No, we can continue it. And then,
Well, continue it as a special.
Well, continue the case because they're applying for a variance, right?
Right.
So if town council believes that that's appropriate and says that the building inspector is correct, then the application is still a live wire and we can handle it. If the town council believes that these folks can proceed by way of, in a non-variance manner, then I would suggest it probably would have to be resubmitted and renoticed and everything else.
But they've submitted a variance right now. It's a
Right.
variance, right? So they would have to, they have
Resubmit
to
as a
withdraw.
special
They would
permit.
have to withdraw the variance right now and wait for town council to come back.
No. See, look, they originally applied, if you look at that, they originally applied for a special permit. Somebody crossed it out.
Yeah.
And then they put a variance, probably because the building inspector said they have
That's
to
exactly
proceed
what
by way of
Right,
variance.
But it's coming across the.
But now
board
there's
as variance.
but now there's a question as to whether the building inspector is indeed accurate. He might be. Even if he is accurate, it believes that these folks have to go by way of variance, we can still undo what we have the ultimate authority over
No, I
him.
know all that. It's just, it's coming across the board as a variance. So I agree totally what you're saying. Every one of your steps is appropriate in my mind. But what I'm trying to say is, they've come across the board and they said, we have an application for variance. And we're saying, you may want to rethink that, because I think this may come in as a special permit based upon what we were hearing and seeing.
Right, so what I'm suggesting is, we continue it, we get the advice of town council, we go to our next meeting, by then we will have the advice of town council. If town council says a variance is the appropriate manner in which to proceed, we can then hear it then. If town council says, no, I don't believe that they don't have to do a variance, then we can give them the opportunity to withdraw and they're gonna have to resubmit. I think that's the way it would probably work.
Just resubmit off the same paperwork, just changing the
Correct,
verbiage.
correct, so it would just be the next meeting.
Yeah.
You just have to give notice to the
Yeah.
abutters and everything
Yep.
else.
So with that plan, I'm wondering, can they actually, if it say that it shouldn't be a variance, they're losing a month or so, could they just be notified that they should just submit as a
I think
special?
it should all be done in an open meeting, plus
Oh,
I don't
okay.
think there's gonna be much construction going on in the next month, but I mean, who knows? I wanna get it
And
right.
just so it knows, they already have the permit that was allowed to do his second story. So
Okay.
he can start,
So
Yeah.
they can
It's
do
just the
they can do
porch.
the second
because
story.
they meet the setbacks for that.
Because the existing, the box
if
that
he
they're
doesn't-
building on
Right.
is conforming.
Correct.
Yeah, but if he
Just-
doesn't get the porch, is he gonna continue building without the porch?
That's the issue.
Yeah.
If we don't get the porch and we have a second floor, that we're kinda left in limbo.
That's what I'm saying, so I don't think they're gonna start building.
But
until they don't get the porch.
I would rather take, we're in the winter now,
Yeah.
snow's on the ground. I would rather take the time and get it right, and believe me, I think you folks might want it too. Because, if you have to proceed by way of variance, I think you got a tough argument. So I think you should probably take the benefit of having council review it and see if there's a way that he thinks that this may be able to proceed by way of a non-variance manner. That's all.
When you do ask questions, town council, the question I have is that they're attaching the porch to a section of the house which is non-conforming, right?
Yep.
27.9.
Yep.
So,
Well,
Isn't that conforming
it
now?
is conforming because they take,
oh, the average.
The average.
So it,
So technically, that's the issue.
I see.
Because in all reality, it's zoned R10, R20, which is obviously a front yard, it's
30 feet.
30 feet, but because of the average, it pushes us down to 27.5. But isn't it correct to say that if this was non-conforming, it would be easier to get a special permit for the porch?
That's why I asked about the 27 feet, because at that point, it would, well, I'm not saying it would be easier to get the special permit, but it would be the special permit route.
But it definitely would be easier than a variance.
Significantly.
Yes.
Which is what we want to ask
Yes.
council about. Because
Since we're using the averages, it puts the house conforming now.
So
In
just to be, just to keep in line with the usual procedure, I will open up a public hearing. I'm not gonna close it, but if anybody wishes to be heard on this now, you can be. Anybody? Okay? I'm not gonna close the public hearing because we're gonna continue the matter, if that's what the board chooses to do. And I would suggest that you reach out to town council, provide him the paperwork that's been submitted. It sounds like you're well-versed on the questions that are at hand. And with the addition of the one, unless, Tony, you want to withdraw it, the question.
No, I
was
think,
that
I think that it's
satisfactory
still,
answer?
it still I think that he should also address that whole,
whether he considers this.
yeah. And I also think, to the planning board's comment, is that there is no site plan here that shows the farmer's porch on
I
it.
was gonna say that, yes, I agree. That
So
needs
we
be
would need to
taken care
see
of.
that with what the actual setback is gonna be for the,
I have a small version, if you can, plot plan you're talking about?
well, I have this one, but it doesn't show the farmer's porch on it.
Here's a small
Oh, you have
version.
a new one?
Why don't you give it to Kelly, because she's going to submit it to council.
Just wanted to-
Look at it, he just wants to look at it.
That's fine. So we don't have that.
I think I turned that in.
I mean, we'll put it on the fast track for you, but believe me, if there's a way to go forward on this by, not by way of a variance, you want to take advantage of that. All right, so, does anyone care to make a motion to continue this matter as previously discussed to the next meeting?
I'll make a motion to extend case 22-19 to King Street Extension, extending it to, do you want me
What's
to?
the next date of our next meeting?
January
January
15th.
January 15th, 2020.
So continue, right?
Continued
continue.
That's the motion. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous motion to continue this matter to January 15th, 2020, pending a, I don't want to say a ruling, but an opinion
Clarification.
from town council as to the question raised. Because I'd like to know the answer too. I mean, I'm not, before we go ahead and either uphold a building inspector's decision that may be detrimental to these folks, or overrule the building inspector, I'd like to have some legal guidance on that. All right, so we'll see you on the 15th, gentlemen.
thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Kelly, here are your recommendations for your file. That concludes the regular business of the Town of Wilmington Board of Appeals for tonight, but we do have some administrative matters. Looks like we have to review and approve minutes from October 9th and October 13th, 2019. I believe the October 9th meeting minutes were available last time, but we didn't have a full complement of the board, so we decided to wait on that until everybody was here. Has all the members had an ability to, or opportunity to review the minutes? Okay, so does anyone care to make a motion on, why don't we take them one at a time, on the October 9th, 2019 minutes?
Motion to approve minutes for 9 October
As
2019,
written,
as
okay.
written.
Second.
Second on that, all those in favor? Unanimous? And then how about November 13th? Anyone care to make a motion on the minutes
Make a
of
motion to approve the minutes for November
13th,
13th,
2019?
2019.
As written.
As written.
Second?
I second.
We have a second on that, all those in favor?
Aye.
I wasn't
Aye.
here, so, was that the last meeting?
That was the last meeting.
So I wasn't here, so I'll abstain.
Yeah, you can abstain. So we have a 4-0 with one abstention. Kelly, do we have anything additional that we need to discuss for the meeting this month?
Just wanted you to sign the two that were accepted tonight.
All right, I'll do that.
Decided. Just these two.
And just to reiterate, Our next meeting is going to be January 15th. It's Wednesday, correct?
Correct.
January 15th, 2020, 7 PM. Be here or be square. Thank you.
Are there any new cases for next one? Are there any new cases?
One.
What, this one, right? The,
Is this cut?
Did you get it?
This cut?
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
we
on.
did get that.
yeah, I got
So
them.
that's,
All right.
That's it.
Now, so we have that for next month. We have this. All right.
So before we adjourn, I have a question. So I had asked you about 362 Middlesex, what's going on with that? We haven't heard
Yeah.
anything in 3 months.
I haven't either. I haven't, in fact, I have to talk to town council and call them and find out what's going on. I know that at some point there's gonna be a meeting scheduled, I don't know.
Yeah, but this is ching, 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 because every month they're just gonna add on more.
Yeah, the problem is, once it's out of my hands and it's in
But
the.
we should be able to get a status from the town manager or somebody, jeez. I mean, since
I
it
mean,
left our board, they were supposed to get back.
What I would suggest, Tom, maybe place a call to, what was this, Keston? Attorney Keston?
Yes,
Attorney
Kessler, yeah.
Kessler? I mean, if you have his information, I'd probably just give him a call. I know that it's coming up within the next couple months.
It is definitely coming up within the next couple of months, you know that for a fact? or-
I believe, but again, this is all in the
Yeah.
court, in the federal court. I'm not kidding.
move ahead.
They really, I think they keep me out of it. Oh, yeah, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I wish to adjourn.
Yeah.
Second.
All, second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right.
Aye, aye, aye.